Part 1. The mockery begins. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, fingers wrapped around the crystal wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid as laughter erupted around me. The dim glow of the chandelier reflected in the polished mahogany surface, but the warmth in the room didn't reach me. I felt cold, not because of the expensive AC humming in the background, but because of the man beside me, the man who was supposed to be my husband, my partner. Daniel Carter, VP of Carter Tech Solutions, was on his third glass of whiskey, his voice loud, his laughter louder. "So, Olivia," he said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder, squeezing just enough for me to feel his dominance. "How's the job search going?" His words dripped with condescension, his smirk widening as his colleagues chuckled into their drinks. My stomach tightened, but I forced a small smile. "Still looking," I murmured, lowering my gaze, playing the part I had perfected for years. The struggling wife, the unemployed woman, the one who needed his support. I let them talk, let them have their fun, while inside me, a storm raged. "I mean, you'd think someone married to a VP would have better connections," chuckled Ryan, one of Daniel's closest friends and the company's head of finance. He leaned back, tipping his glass toward me like he was making a toast. "Or maybe the problem isn't the connections. Maybe it's competence?" Laughter. I swallowed hard, gripping my glass tighter, fighting the urge to shatter it in my palm. If only they knew. "I told her she should apply as a secretary," Daniel continued, shaking his head with mock sympathy. "But she insists she wants something serious." The way he said serious made my blood boil. "I mean, come on, sweetheart," he went on, patting my hand like I was a child. "You don't have experience, no real skills. You think they're just going to hire you as a manager somewhere?" "Maybe McDonald's is hiring," Michael, the COO, joked, sending the entire room into another fit of laughter. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, not because their words hurt, but because I was holding back, because I knew the truth, because while they sat here, laughing, they didn't realize the very company they worked for belonged to me. Carter Tech Solutions, my company, my empire, built with my blood, my sweat, my sacrifice. But they didn't know that. No, because I had made sure to keep my ownership hidden behind layers of holding companies, private investors, and strategic anonymity. To the world, I was just a struggling housewife married to a successful businessman. To them, I was nothing more than an accessory, a woman lucky enough to wear designer clothes that my husband paid for, sit in a house that he provided, and be part of a world that he controlled. If only they knew. "I mean, come on, Olivia," Daniel said, taking another sip of his whiskey, his voice thick with arrogance. "How many rejections is that now? 10? 15? 17, I whispered, my voice barely audible over their laughter. Daniel grinned, thinking he had won. 17 interviews, 17 times I had walked into my own company, pretending to be a nobody, testing the very executives I had hired myself, and 17 times I had watched them turn away brilliant candidates, mistreat employees, mock women like me, thinking they were untouchable. I had let them think I was failing, let them think I was desperate, let Daniel believe he was the powerful one in our marriage. I let them believe their own delusion, because I was waiting for the perfect moment. And it was almost here. Daniel's voice pulled me back to the present. "Honey, maybe you should try that coffee shop down the street," he said, grinning. "I heard they're hiring baristas." Ryan laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "A barista, now that's a job that fits." More laughter. I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because tomorrow morning they wouldn't be laughing anymore. I reached for my water, taking a slow sip to calm the fire burning inside me, my heartbeat steady, my hands relaxed. They thought they were mocking a helpless woman. But what they were really doing was mocking their boss, the woman who, in less than 24 hours, would fire every single one of them. I walked into my home that night, a mansion Daniel believed was his, bought with money he assumed he earned. The sound of his laughter still echoed in my ears, but it wasn't anger that fueled me anymore. It was satisfaction, because tomorrow, everything would change. I took the long way upstairs, my fingers grazing the smooth railings, my heels clicking softly against the marble floors. This house, the luxury, the life he thought he had built, it was all mine. Every painting on the walls, every car in the garage, every expensive bottle of whiskey Daniel so carelessly poured for his friends. It was mine. I had built it. I had worked for it. I had sacrificed for it. And tomorrow, he and his little circle of arrogant fools would learn just how badly they had miscalculated. The moment I stepped into my office, the quiet hum of my computers greeted me. This wasn't the office Daniel knew about, the one filled with neatly stacked books and harmless paperwork. No, this was my real domain, hidden behind a sliding panel in the wall, a room only I had access to. 3 large monitors flickered to life as I sat down, my private network linking directly to the security feeds, corporate reports, and internal communications at Carter Tech Solutions. At exactly 11:45 p.m., a notification popped up on my screen. Rachel, everything is in place. Board members briefed, legal team ready, morning meeting confirmed. I leaned back, a slow smirk forming on my lips. Good. Rachel had been with me since the beginning, one of the few people who knew the truth. She had been my eyes and ears inside the company, gathering information, documenting every crime, every unethical decision Daniel and his friends had made. I pulled up the files, years of evidence meticulously compiled, fraudulent expense reports, lavish vacations, personal shopping sprees, all written off as business development. Insider trading, leaking confidential information to competitors, making personal stock gains while bleeding the company dry. Harassment complaints, buried by HR, ignored by the leadership, dismissed with a joke. Illegal dealings, under-the-table deals, contracts signed for personal gain, backdoor agreements that risked the company's reputation. And Daniel. Oh, Daniel. I opened a folder labeled Personal Affairs. There it was, the affair, the texts, the emails, the receipts from hotel bookings. The woman was a junior executive from a rival firm. My husband was sleeping with someone who had been feeding him false information, making him believe he was playing the corporate game when, in reality, he was the one being played. I let out a slow breath. He thought I was the fool. He had no idea I had been watching, waiting, calculating his every move. I sent a quick message to Rachel. Tomorrow, I want security to be ready. As soon as the board meeting starts, I want them in place. Rachel responded instantly. Understood. Their access has already been revoked. By 9 a.m., none of them will be able to enter their offices. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below me, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Tomorrow, I would walk into my company, not as Daniel Carter's struggling wife, but as the CEO, the woman they had laughed at, mocked, humiliated, the woman they never saw coming. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just fire them, I would destroy them. Morning arrived with the crisp air of anticipation. I dressed carefully, choosing an unremarkable navy blue suit, nothing too flashy, nothing that would give away my power. Today, I was not Olivia Carter, CEO of Carter Tech Solutions. Today, I was just another desperate job seeker. I arrived at the towering glass headquarters of my company, at exactly 8:30 a.m., walking through the revolving doors like I had done so many times before, but this time I wasn't invisible. This time I had a role to play. The receptionist barely looked up as I approached. "Name?" she asked, tapping away at her keyboard. "Olivia Carter," I said softly. She scanned the system, found my appointment, and gestured toward the HR waiting area. "You're early. Have a seat." I nodded and sat, taking in the atmosphere around me. The buzzing energy of employees passing by, the conversations held in hushed voices, the faint sound of coffee machines whirring in the distance. They all walked past me like I was nothing. Just how Daniel and his friends saw me. I waited, pretending to read a magazine, all while keeping an eye on the executive floor through the glass-walled offices ahead. At exactly 8:45 a.m., Daniel walked in. I didn't turn my head, but I felt it, his presence, the commanding arrogance in his stride. He was all confidence, greeting his colleagues with a smirk and a firm handshake. He was untouchable, or so he thought. Behind him, Ryan, Michael, and the rest of their toxic little club followed, their laughter echoing down the hallway as they made their way toward the executive meeting rooms. Not once did he look in my direction. Not once did he realize that his own wife was sitting there, waiting for an interview in a company she owned. At 9 a.m. sharp, the HR representative arrived. "Miss Carter, follow me." I stood, straightened my blazer, and walked into the lion's den. The interview room was sleek and modern, but the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. 3 men sat behind a long glass table, mid-level managers who worked under Daniel, men who had no idea they were being tested today. The moment I sat down, I saw it in their eyes, the disinterest, the dismissive glance at my resume before even asking the first question. The man in the middle, Thomas, leaned back in his chair, flipping through my paperwork lazily. "So, Olivia," he said, his tone patronizing, "you've been between jobs for some time now." I forced a nervous chuckle. "Yes, I've been looking for the right opportunity." "Right?" He exchanged a glance with his colleagues. The man to his left, Jordan, leaned forward. "And what makes you think you're qualified for a role at Carter Tech?" I hesitated, on purpose, before answering. "I believe my experience in strategic planning and leadership." "Leadership?" The third man, Marcus, laughed outright. "Where exactly have you led before?" I clenched my hands beneath the table, keeping my expression neutral. "I've worked on several high-level projects independently." "Freelance consulting," Thomas interrupted, his lips twitching. "That's different from an actual job." I nodded, letting them dig their own graves. Jordan sighed, rubbing his temple. "Look, Olivia, we get a lot of applicants, and to be honest, we're looking for people with real corporate experience." Real corporate experience. I built this corporation. I ran this empire from the shadows. And these men, these mediocre, entitled men, had no idea they were talking down to their own CEO. I glanced at my resume in front of them, a carefully constructed fake version of my work history, one that made me look competent, but not impressive enough for them to care. Because I knew exactly how they operated. I had seen their real hiring process, rejecting qualified women, promoting underqualified men, pushing out anyone who didn't fit their boys' club mentality, and I had let them believe they were winning. The final blow came when Marcus smirked, shutting my resume folder with a soft thud. "Well, Olivia," he said, his voice dripping with amusement, "we appreciate you coming in today, but honestly, I think your best bet is something more fitting. Maybe something in reception, or, entry-level admin work." They laughed, all 3 of them. They laughed in my face. They thought I was nothing. I smiled, because in less than an hour, I would be their boss. Thank you for your time, I said softly, standing up. As I walked toward the door, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A single message from Rachel. They're in the boardroom. Security is ready. Time to end this. I turned back one last time, looking at the 3 men who had just dismissed me as irrelevant. Actually, I said, tilting my head, my voice steady, cold, and powerful. I think I'll be seeing you again. Very soon. Then I walked out, leaving them clueless about what was coming next.
Part 4. The Ultimate Power. Move. The moment I stepped out of that interview room, my entire demeanor changed. The act was over. No more pretending, no more playing the role of the desperate job seeker. I was done humbling myself for men who had no idea they were about to lose everything. I walked straight toward the executive boardroom, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floors, each step a countdown to their downfall. Rachel was waiting just outside, a knowing smirk playing on her lips as she handed me a security access badge, one that only the CEO of Carter Tech Solutions possessed. Inside, I could already hear the muffled voices of Daniel and his friends. They were laughing, completely unaware that their reign was coming to an end. Rachel leaned in and whispered, "Everything is in place. The board is waiting. Legal has the final contracts. As soon as you walk in, security will block their access to the building." I took a deep breath, smoothed my blazer, and pushed the doors open. The room fell silent. 12 senior executives and board members sat at the long glass table, their eyes locked on me in confusion. At the head of the table sat Daniel, mid-laugh, a whiskey glass in his hand. His smirk faded the second he saw me. "Olivia?" His brows furrowed, his voice laced with irritation. "What the hell are you doing here?" I strode to the empty chair at the head of the table, the one meant for the CEO, and sat down. Every pair of eyes in the room widened. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, crossing my legs. "I think it's time we discuss the future of Carter Tech Solutions." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "This is a private board meeting," he scoffed. "You don't belong here." I reached into my purse, pulled out a thick stack of documents, and slid them across the table. My name was on every single one. The official ownership contracts, the legal filings, the paper trail leading straight to me. "Actually," I said, my voice unwavering, "I own this company." Silence. Then, chaos. Ryan shot out of his chair, grabbing one of the documents with shaking hands. This has to be fake." Michael paled, flipping through the pages as his fingers trembled. No, this can't be right." "Daniel?" He just sat there, frozen, his face draining of all color. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "This is some kind of joke." I leaned forward, my expression cold. "The joke is that you thought you were in control." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You're lying," he growled. You don't even have a job. You're just..." "Your boss," I interrupted smoothly. "I have been your boss for years, watching you waste company resources, manipulate stock prices, and turn this workplace into your personal playground. And guess what? I have all the evidence to prove it." I nodded toward Rachel, who pressed a button on a large screen behind me. Instantly, images and videos flashed across the screen. Emails, recorded conversations, hidden surveillance footage. Every underhanded deal, every unethical action, every fraudulent expense report. And the affair. There, in full color, was Daniel's late-night rendezvous with the junior executive from our competitor, the same woman he had been feeding confidential information to. A gasp rippled through the room. The board members exchanged looks of shock and anger. Ryan put his head in his hands. "We're screwed." Michael visibly gulped. "They'll blacklist us from the entire industry." "Daniel?" He was shaking with rage. You set me up!" he hissed, his fists clenching against the table. "You ruined me!" I tilted my head, allowing a slow smile to creep across my lips. "No, Daniel. You did that all on your own." And with that, I pushed a final document across the table, his official termination papers. Daniel's hand hovered over the paper, his entire body trembling. He knew there was no way out. I leaned in, my voice a whisper, just for him. Now, get out of my company. Security entered the room at that exact moment, and as Daniel Carter was escorted out of my building, his career, his reputation, his entire life crumbling around him, I simply sat back and watched him lose everything. The world outside Carter Tech Solutions was still oblivious to the storm that had just erupted within its walls. But as I sat in my private office, surveying the wreckage of the corporate empire that had once been Daniel's, a sense of calm washed over me. His humiliation had barely begun. I could see him now, out of my window, standing at the bottom of the company's grand staircase, his face twisted with a mixture of disbelief and rage. His former colleagues, his allies, his so-called friends, were scattered like leaves in the wind. Some had already begun to leave the building, their faces pale with realization, their steps shaky. They hadn't just lost their jobs, they had lost everything. Michael, the brash COO, had been the first to break, his voice shaking when he finally admitted to his part in the corruption. His admission was a relief to me. The first domino had fallen, and the rest would soon follow. I pressed a button on my desk, summoning Sarah, my trusted assistant. She entered quickly, her face composed but her eyes shining with excitement. "It's done," she said, her voice low but confident. "James and the others, no one's left standing. The legal team is moving fast, all their assets are frozen, and the SEC is already reviewing everything." "Good," I replied, turning to face the window again. "Now we make sure they never have a chance to recover." The blowback from their termination had been swift, but it was the aftermath I was most interested in. It wasn't just about ruining Daniel's career. It was about the systematic destruction of the toxic culture he had fostered. Every cruel joke, every promotion he'd handed out to the wrong people, every underhanded tactic, it all came back to him now, and I was the one holding the cards. The hours passed quickly as I watched the news spread like wildfire. Social media was ablaze with commentary about the CEO's secret identity, the wife who had spent years hiding in plain sight, pretending to be the weak and incapable woman they had ridiculed for so long. The press couldn't get enough of the story. They called me a hero, a woman who had taken back control in the most powerful way possible. But all the attention, all the praise, it meant nothing to me. Revenge wasn't about the spotlight. It was about removing the poison from the company. And now, with Daniel's downfall, I was ready to clean house. I turned to Sarah, who was standing silently by the door. "Set up the internal meeting," I said, my voice cold. "It's time for the staff to know what's really happening, and get me Peterson. He's next in line." Peterson was a loyalist, a middle manager I had planted as a mole to keep me informed. He had already been briefed on the changes and was ready to help me steer the company in the right direction. With the executive team gutted, it was time to rebuild the company from the ground up. As Sarah left to organize the meeting, I picked up the phone and called one of my most trusted lawyers. "The settlement offers are ready," I said, staring at the framed photo of my father on the desk, his face a constant reminder of how far I had come. "Make sure the media gets it. We don't want them thinking this is just a corporate cleanup. It's a message." The next few hours felt like a blur of action. Meetings with the board, press conferences, and internal memos to ensure the company's future was on the right track. The air was thick with nervous excitement, but there was no fear, not anymore. I looked over the final draft of the statement I was about to release. Reynolds Technologies is undergoing a major restructuring, focused on accountability, innovation, and integrity. There was no mention of the scandal, no mention of Daniel's betrayal, just a quiet acknowledgement that things were changing. The changes had already begun, and the truth was, it wasn't just Daniel who had been in the dark. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly, letting the weight of everything that had just transpired sink in. The final phase of my plan was coming to fruition. The perfect storm had been unleashed, and it was only a matter of time before they realized they were powerless to stop it. But as I sat in my office, I couldn't help but wonder, was it over? The answer came to me when I saw a new notification on my screen. "James is trying to call." I didn't hesitate. I clicked the button to decline. The game was over, and now the real work began. The storm that had shaken Carter Tech Solutions had finally begun to settle, but I knew the final strike had yet to land. Daniel might have been dragged out of the building in disgrace, his career obliterated, his name forever tied to corruption and incompetence, but something told me he wasn't done yet. I sat at my desk, staring at my screen as the notifications kept rolling in. News articles, social media threads, financial reports, each one painting the picture of a company on the brink of an extraordinary transformation. The media had already dubbed it the most ruthless CEO takeover in corporate history. The irony? I hadn't taken over anything. I had always been in control. Sarah entered my office, her tablet in hand, her expression unreadable. That was never a good sign. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "It's Daniel," she said. "He's threatening to go public." I felt my stomach tighten. I had expected some kind of retaliation, but I had hoped that by now Daniel would have realized he was fighting a losing battle. "What exactly is he threatening?" Sarah placed the tablet on my desk, pulling up a live video feed. There he was, Daniel, sitting in some cheap hotel room, his tie loosened, his face lined with exhaustion, rage burning in his eyes. I pressed play. "They think they've won," he spat into the camera. "They think they can take everything from me and get away with it. But they don't know the real story." I leaned back in my chair, watching as Daniel tried to spin his downfall into a conspiracy. He claimed I had manipulated the company, that I had sabotaged him from the very beginning, that I had been lying, deceiving, plotting my revenge for years. I almost laughed. Daniel? Playing the victim? The same man who had mocked me for years, who had dismissed me as useless, who had stolen credit for my ideas and belittled me in front of his colleagues, and now he wanted pity. Sarah paused the video. "He's trying to stir up sympathy," she said, "trying to convince the board that he was set up." "Do you think it's working?" I asked, my voice calm. She shook her head. "No one's buying it, but he's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things." I exhaled slowly. This was his last move, and I was about to checkmate him. I reached for my phone and dialed. The line rang twice before my legal team picked up. "I want every piece of evidence we have against Daniel compiled into an official statement," I said. "His financial fraud, his stock manipulation, his backdoor dealings with competitors. Make sure every word is airtight." "Yes, ma'am," came the firm response. I turned back to Sarah. "And the video?" "It's already been flagged by multiple sources for misinformation," she said. "By tomorrow morning, it'll be buried beneath the real story." I smirked. Daniel thought he was a player in this game, but he was just another pawn. The night passed in a blur of legal filings, press releases, and strategic moves that ensured Daniel's every attempt to retaliate only backfired harder. By morning, his video had disappeared, and in its place, a scathing report detailing every single crime he had committed while working at Carter Tech. The board held an emergency meeting, not because they doubted me, but because they wanted to ensure Daniel could never come within a mile of the company ever again. His name was officially erased from the records. His shares, revoked, his severance, frozen, his legacy, dead. Sarah walked into my office, a slow smile spreading across her lips. "He tried to log into his corporate accounts this morning," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "He got an error message," she replied. "Account terminated." I let out a slow breath. It was over. Daniel had lost everything. He had mocked me, underestimated me, tried to destroy me. And now, he was nothing. I stood up, walking to the massive glass windows of my office, looking out over the city. There was no victory dance, no champagne toast, just a quiet, satisfying peace, and the knowledge that I had won.
Lesson learned, and what's next? At the end of the day, this wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice, about proving that underestimation is a dangerous mistake. Daniel and his colleagues thought they were untouchable, that their power would shield them from consequences. that I would always be the silent, insignificant wife in the background. They were wrong. The real lesson here? Power is not about who speaks the loudest, it's about who moves the smartest. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to beg for respect. I waited, I planned, and when the moment was right, I took everything from them, just like they had tried to do to me. Now, the company is stronger, the culture is better, and the toxic leadership is gone. But what about Daniel? Well, let's just say his story isn't over yet. The fallout from his downfall is only beginning, and there's one final twist that no one sees coming. What do you think will happen next? Leave a comment below, like this video, and subscribe to Men's Cheating Story to catch the next explosive part of this story. Because trust me, the best revenge isn't just success. It's watching them fall even further. Stay tuned.